Welcome back to the Boomerang Podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Drew.
And today we want to talk a little bit about the banking crisis, right? What happened with the banks, Drew? Who went down?
We had our fifth one go down.
Fifth one.
I think last Friday.
Citizen,
in Iowa. Yeah, Citizens Bank.
Citizens Bank. And they're now in receivership with the FDIC. They've been taken over by Iowa State Trust Company, something like that. So people can still actually access their money. But it's scary. It's an ongoing trend. We've seen, SVB this year. We've seen a lot of these banks.
Charter Signature, right.
A
lot of banks on the cusp of failing.
Yep. And it has to do with their exposure, their assets. What happened here?
Yeah, I think in this case they had a heavy exposure to commercial trucking, which we had talked about in a previous episode of just that industry, having definitely hardships. And so they weren't necessarily investing in Iowa or, regional companies. Sounds like they kind of went outside of that and invested in, commercial trucking, in which case, it's been hit hard. They weren't able to make the payments, and that's how we came to this bank failing.
Yeah. And I think we're going to continue to see this trend. I mean, if people think it's going to stop at these 5 banks, I mean, they're fooling
another
themselves.
thing coming.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing we're going to probably see a collapse in the derivative market at a certain point. I think we're building up to that. What we've seen so far this year with SVB was they had some exposure to some very bad assets, some very toxic assets. The FDIC doesn't really have very much money to bail these banks out.
No.
I mean, they have 50
maybe
50 billion, 50, 100 billion.
Maybe.
I mean, you're talking about with the banking system, you're probably looking at $20 to $25 trillion of deposits. So I would expect that more banks fail. We're seeing a collapse in the treasury bonds, right? No one wants them. No one wants to touch U.S. treasuries. And that's what the banks are. I mean, when you think of a bank, or at least when I think of a bank, I think of it as a person, right? Having their own investment portfolio. And, just like a person, what these banks have done is they've invested very heavily in things like treasuries. Yep. So when these treasuries start going south, these banks, right, traditionally they look at treasuries as stability. That's why the banks go into these, right? But unfortunately, when these stable assets, right, what people think is stable isn't, when these treasuries start going south, the problem becomes what? Banks start to fail.
Right. And I mean, I think, like you said, this trend's going to continue. Sure, commercial trucking now. Think of all the banks in commercial real estate. Eventually what happens is, the people quit paying their business loans, right? And then, they start paying their personal stuff, their home loans, their autos.
Right.
Repossessions are probably going to go through the roof in the next few years or next few months, really. And so I think this kind of trickle-down effect where eventually the banks are holding this debt that they can't get rid of. They can't refinance with these rates.
They're stuck.
And they're stuck, right? And I think we got a couple hundred banks that are in that position where they're getting close to being stuck, and what are they doing, right? And there's only so many options, for them to play out.
Right.
And ultimately, they're either going to get bought out, they're going to go under. And I think with this specific bank, 20-30% of the deposits were not FDIC insured, meaning they had more than $250K in the account. So, yeah, I mean, realistically, by the letter of the law, that money is gone.
Right. And what I think you're seeing here is I think you're seeing the consolidation of the banking system. I think what this is you're going to continue to see these regional banks start to fail. That's going to start hitting the bigger banks, right? I would expect the last 3 banks standing are probably going to be JP Morgan, Citibank, and Bank of America, right? And when they fail, who steps in? The Federal Reserve,
correct?
Right? And what do you have leading up to that process? What do we know that they want?
CBDC,
right? Correct. And what the CBDC is a bank account directly with the Federal Reserve. So it's almost like we know the ending of the movie, right? We understand how the story ends. So it's like we're witnessing how the movie's taking place right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think the big thing is it's all about control with them. And as they're losing control in this system, they're going to bring the system down. It's what we're currently living through now. And then ultimately, to get us into another system of control, they implement the CBDC, which is programmable money, which we've talked about at length in every episode. And we're only going to have a few, free places that will hopefully fight against it. And, I think before the episode, you were telling me Florida, and I know Texas. Ideally, we'd love it to be Arizona.
Yeah, they've outlawed the CBDC.
And hopefully that continues and that, other states pick that up and we just never get to a point where they can shove it down our throat. But we both know that ultimately if they could get it their way, that's what they would want.
Well, I sense a tactic here, which is problem, reaction, solution.
Create the problem. Get the hysteria.
Get the desired reaction, and then have the solution that they want ready to go, which is the CBDC. So right now they're creating the problem. Soon they're going to get the reaction, right? And they have the solution ready to go. They're ready for it.
It's been ready. They've been planning this out for years.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what states like Florida, Texas have done. I mean, Florida's really absorbed a lot of the tech companies, right? A lot of them have moved down there.
Yeah. A lot of financial companies have gone from New York to Florida as well.
They've created the right business environment. I mean, I don't care what anybody says about DeSantis. He's been a great governor. Right? No doubt about it. I think he's coordinated opposition with Trump. I think they're playing parts, but That's for a different
Everybody
episode.
plays a role. But he's done a great job in Florida.
He's done a great job. I don't care what anybody says about DeSantis. But they've outlawed the CBDC. I know Texas is talking about minting their own gold and silver coinage, right?
Yep.
That'll be interesting to see what they do.
Or you get a direct deposit from your check right into their depository. We'll buy gold and silver for you. And I think you'll have like a debit card per se that you would use that could convert in real time. So instead of keeping your money in a bank, in a savings account, you can keep it at their depository and actually have physical gold and silver, which is, I think, quite brilliant.
And it's an interesting implementation because it's kind of what you've talked about with me just in private, just about having the digital ledger, right? Having the gold and silver to back it, having a digital ledger to keep everything on track, right? Keep everybody honest and being able to use it in a realistic way on a debit card or a credit card, right?
Correct. Yep.
That's an interesting thing Texas is doing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you utilize blockchain, and I know a lot of people are big into crypto, but with like Bitcoin or most blockchains, what's nice about it is it's transparent ledger. So if you make a transaction, everybody can see it. The government makes a transaction. If you send money here or vice versa, whatever, it's all transparent on the blockchain, right? So it just completely erases this whole, as you were talking about, what's the deal with you were just talking about the Federal Reserve, right? They have a private balance sheet that nobody sees.
Yeah, so one thing to realize about the Fed is the Fed has unlimited money. The Fed has an on-balance sheet and an off-balance sheet. I think the on-balance sheet, they have something like $8 trillion of debt, right? Still terrible, but not that bad. My guess is if anybody saw what their off-balance sheet is, no one's ever seen it, by the way. This is the craziest part. These are the people running our monetary system, and we've never seen what they're actually printing, what they're actually using. My guess is it's in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, if not the quadrillions. Yeah. Right? Because what are they able to do? They're able to keep the system afloat. The Fed is the buyer and lender of last resort. Everything is going to be, right, when we talk about the banks, right, just to kind of sum up kind of what we're talking about is when we talk about bank collapses, when we talk about all this stuff collapsing, the Federal Reserve is getting ready right there with the solution. That's why they have this, right? That's why they're going to be the ones to implement the CBDC. They have total control of the monetary system.
Correct.
And I'm very confident that at the end of this, Trump will be back. I mean, Trump had Andrew Jackson posted up on his wall in the Oval Office. And if you know anything about Andrew Jackson got rid of the central banks not once. Twice.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what Trump's doing is he's taking the Andrew Jackson approach, which is getting the people to wake up, understand who the true enemy is, right? And take action at that point through everybody, right? The people banding together and the people acting as one to say, hey, we don't want this anymore, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's a scam. And I mean, really, people always ask, okay, banks are failing, this is happening, X, Y, and Z. I'm average Joe. What the hell do I do? How do I protect myself, right? And I think that's where we have a unique situation because we can't help the average person help protect themselves. Right. And, obviously gold and silver is, where we tend to lean. I think it's the easiest way for the average person to get out of the system, and into something that they can hold, something that has privacy and, a 5,000 year, receipt and record of never going to zero.
Yeah. I mean, it's no secret that we're gold brokers, right? It's no secret that we work at Midas Gold Group. But I think at the same time it's the idea that we practice what we preach. We want to make sure that people, including ourselves, especially ourselves, right? We don't want exposure to the entire banking crisis because it's going to come up out of nowhere, right? They announced Citizens Bank on a Friday, right? A Friday afternoon.
Right.
How convenient, right? What gold and silver really represent to us is it's a way to get your money out of harm's way. Be your own central bank. Right? Take possession of your own money because you know what? If you leave it in the hands of these morons, because that's what they are, they're morons. It's gone. It's gone.
And it's gone.
And I think what the Federal Reserve and the bankers, right, the central bankers, I don't think what they're expecting is the unintended consequence of implementing a CBDC, right? And that is, I think it's going to create the grassroots movement and the utilization of gold and silver once again. I think people are going to say, I don't want to take part in the system.
Yep. What are we going to do? We go back to the Constitution.
I mean, we saw, the scary part about the CBDC is, take the truckers, the Canadian truckers, for example. If you were a Canadian citizen, you donated to those truckers when they surrounded, I think it was not Calgary, but
Ontario. Where were they at?
I think it was Ottawa.
I
think it was Ottawa. If you donated to those truckers and you were a Canadian citizen, they shut down your bank account. And literally, Trudeau and his people came out and they said, and they were happy about it. They were like, yeah, we're shutting down their bank accounts. End of story. So it's like, I see a totalitarian force, and I think most people do, moving in on us. It's the force of communism. That's what the Federal Reserve is. It's a Marxist organization. And I think it's hard for people to grasp just the idea that we've been living in this communism our entire lives financially.
Yep.
Think about that, right?
Yeah, it's not a free market, you know.
There are no free markets.
Yeah, I mean, things would play out a lot differently. So when you have something like the Federal Reserve and these central banks that really run everything, you know, the markets can't work the way that they're supposed to. Sometimes you need to fail. You need to have things fail so something greater can come out of the ashes. And when we've been, you know, pumping money here and, you know, artificially, you know, keeping this market afloat, not only has it created just overwhelming debt, you know, because that's what it takes, but it just makes that bubble bigger. So when it pops, there's even more damage, right? And I think that's the scary thing is, you know, people, I just don't think they're going to be ready for, you know, that level of financial, you know, involvement in how these markets crash and just what that really means to your financial situation at home. So protect yourself, you know, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through any questions you have with gold and silver.
And just one other thing to add, you know, I'll just give people this example, and that is, what was it, about 2.5 years ago when the story was a group of Reddit users got together and they went long on AMC and GameStop stock. Hedge funds, major hedge funds who had huge short positions on these things, right? And the reason they have shorts, just so people understand, is that, you know, AMC, right, GameStop, these are, you know, relics of the past. So they're betting that price stays low. So a group of Reddit users, we'll just use the official narrative, got together, bought up tremendous amounts of the stock. Well, what happened? These hedge funds started losing tens of billions of dollars. They called up the financial companies and put a halt to trading, right? So if you think that there's free markets out there, that to me stood out as this is as corrupt gets. There's people at the top, right? And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's a George Carlin quote. It's a club and you ain't in it.
They never let us in. Anyways, that's all the alpha we're bringing today. We'll keep you guys updated as new events unfold. Really appreciate the time. And Matt, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, you can find us on KelliAnn Hub News on Rumble. Kelly, we love you. Kelly's the best. Where else, Drew?
We're also with Rachel Writesideblond on her podcast, Not Politics as Usual. And that's on george.video.com.
Video.george.com. Yeah. Not just politics as usual with Rachel. She's fantastic. And we have some really awesome interviews coming up. And definitely check out our interview with Drew Hernandez. He was one of the most interesting guys you'll ever talk to. He had to dress up as Antifa just to infiltrate and get footage. So unbelievable guy, unbelievable interview. Check that out, and we'll see you guys next time.